My name is Jasper. I'm the owner of Jaspel LLC and the head of Team Backpack, which is developing Backpack Hero.
So Jazz, talk about this game, Backpack Hero, because at a first glance, you'd think when you say inventory management game, I think like point and click adventure game, but this game is so much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I was inspired by other roguelike games, especially card games, the idea of collecting cards, using them for combat, and the initial concepts came from a card game where the placement of your cards was significant. Where you played cards would determine their effect, or which enemies they hit, things like that. And over time, this sort of placement mechanic evolved into the inventory management mechanic, which you see in the game now.
And this game, like, there's a lot, like, there's elements of, like you said, roguelike, turn-based RPGs. Like, there's a little bit of Zelda in here as well. And there's also, like, a little bit of Resident Evil 4 in there. There's a lot of, talk about the inspirations you were looking at when you were creating this game.
Yeah, I've heard the Resident Evil 4 thing a lot. I did play that game, but it was not on my mind at all when I was working on this. I think this kind of evolved from card games. So the main inspirations would be things like Slay the Spire or other strategy roguelikes, Into the Breach, XCOM, things like that. In terms of the inventory management, one game that I would reference would be Deus Ex. The original Deus Ex game had a very complicated grid-based inventory system, and your character had a lot of different stuff that they could carry. And this included things like weapons, ammunition, tools. So you had to really make a lot of strategic choices about which pieces of inventory you would keep. It didn't have any placement mechanic, but I used to spend hours just organizing my inventory within that game. And all of the sequels have done away with it. So if you've played any of like the later Deus Ex games, you wouldn't be familiar with it. I think it's only the first one.
I think people tend to think those mechanics are tedious, but there is like a certain percentage of gamers that like inventory management, or just managing things, whether it doesn't have to be a sim game, it can be something else, just managing your little mini game area, whatever, if it's like a little sim economy, even if that's not the core experience.
I play a lot of Animal Crossing, and that game has very tedious inventory management, I believe. But I think it's just how it's done. The inventory management in Backpack Hero is engaging because there are significant decisions that you have to make about where to place things, which items you'll carry, which ones you'll leave behind, and how you should organize. The problem with a lot of inventory management systems, including Animal Crossing, is that it really doesn't matter which items you carry, how you carry them, where you place them within your inventory. So it does become just busy work because there's no gameplay around it. There's no interesting decisions that you have to make.
Where did the idea come from for the literal she's a literal pack rat? That's adorable. Like, how did that idea evolve?
That one came to me right away. I mean, as soon as we thought it was a game about collecting things in your inventory and like hoarding items, it seemed like a pack rat was a logical choice. The character of Purse evolved a lot over time, including based on feedback from the community. But I would mostly cite Gangs Robin, who's the artist and the writer for the game story. And he really did a lot to develop like who she was, what she looked like, and he's the one who's responsible for making her so cute.
Now, how big is your team?
There's just 3 of us. There's myself. I've got the Gangs Robin, who does the art and is doing helps me a lot with brainstorming, writing the game, things like that. And then there is Binary Counter, who does all of the music for the game. He's done a lot of the sound engineering, and he's also done some of the web hosting and whatnot on the backside.
So a small team. How does that work with you guys? Is this all a part-time passion project thing, or is this all 3 of yours full-time passion project?
At the moment, I think that it's a part-time passion project for us. I was working multiple jobs when I first started working on this game, and I was just thinking of it as a game jam game. And I had some hopes that it might be able to go further, but I definitely didn't have specific plans for that. When it kind of blew up on itch and became quite popular, then we transitioned a little bit. I quit some of my jobs, so now I'm mostly devoting myself to this project 7 days a week. But I believe both of my teammates are still have other full-time employment.
That's like, you don't understand how many times I talk to game devs and how game jams, like how some of the most popular games start out as game jams, just like these little, like, some of them are 24, some are 48, some are a week, like it all matters. But like some of the biggest hits in indie gaming come originally from game jams.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you don't know exactly what's going to be fun or how fun something might be until you prototype it. So I think that game jams give you an opportunity to prototype things quickly and then see what kind of reception that they get. I'm a big believer in them, and I'm also just a big believer in making smaller games. I think there's this concept in the industry, especially the AAA industry, that every game has to be this big, epic, complicated thing. It has to include so much content and microtransactions, and it's not just a game, but a marketplace. And I feel like one of the things that draws people to game jam games is the opportunity to see something that's genuinely different. And it doesn't always need to be something complex.
So talk about, like, is it not only is this an inventory management game, you also have elements of RNG, you have mini games in there, like you have a spin the wheel type of a game, as well as like it's a turn-based combat game as well. Like how does the combat work? It looks like it harkens back to your backpack and how it's organized, which gives you different abilities to use as you find items in your dungeon run. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as you find items, you place them into your backpack, and you can see, based on their position, how strong they'll be. So placing, for example, a gemstone next to a sword increases the damage of the sword. And you can see this as you're organizing things. So lots of items have both power-ups and restrictions that are dependent on their location. So the first thing you do is organize everything and try to determine what the best organization will be for what you want to do. Then when you go into combat, it becomes turn-based combat. It's kind of JRPG style, maybe based on Final Fantasy or something like that. You mostly just click on which items you want to use at which time, but based on where they're positioned, they can have different effects. And we're also planning to include more features that will encourage the player to use certain parts of their inventory at different times based on the threats that they're facing.
Now, how much meta can players get into with this inventory system? Because, I mean, I've seen your trailer and I've seen some gameplay, and some of these, the way that things are organized are almost hypnotic. Like you have, like, there's just one screenshot where there's like all these like claw items, and then they're surrounded by these coin items, or just surrounded by these items. Like I can just see that there's synergy there based on what you just described.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different synergies. That basically every item in the game has its own unique positioning and both its strength and weaknesses based on where it can be placed. Some of the screenshots that you've seen may be from players who have organized things partially for aesthetic purposes. I know that part of the community is really excited for a creative mode where they'll just be able to kind of design the inventory that they choose rather than the roguelike aspects. But, you know, I think you also asked about how much meta progress is in the game. Right now, I think we've got somewhere around 70 or 80 different challenge runs, many of which can be unlocked as the player continues through the game. And as we work through early access, we'll also be putting an overworld into the game. So after each run into the dungeon, you'll be able to return to an overworld where you'll be able to build structures and things like that. So the player will be encouraged to continue playing and continue leveling up in that way.
Yeah, you know, my wife and I, we love dungeon crawler ARPGs or just dungeon crawler games, like Diablo, because when you go through a dungeon, you're just grabbing a bunch of stuff, killing everything, beating it, then you go back to your town or whatever overworld, and then you get to go through all your loot. Something about that gameplay loop is so addicting to certain people, especially me. Like this game screams that with me, going through a dungeon run, getting a bunch of new items, going back to the overworld, going through each item, and now you've added another mechanic on top of that, which is organizing the items for optimal damage or optimal builds or whatever you're doing. It seems like a really interesting gameplay loop.
Yeah, I think the original Diablo also has this similar inventory system where you can place things in grid-based inventory, and different weapons and items take up a different amount of inventory space. I think the difference with something like Diablo, if I recall correctly, is that you have certain slots and you can put certain items within them. So there's like an armor slot, and you can put within it, the breastplate, or, this one or that one, but you're never able to have multiple of them. One of the things about Backpack Hero that's fun, if slightly illogical, is that you can hoard many of the same item, and they can, in some cases, synergize with one another. I think one of the problems with having like a weapon slot or a shield slot in your inventory is that it limits you to just one.
So many games come down to math. Can you kind of paint me a picture of like your Excel sheet in like your office, where you're having all these items and the modifiers they do and the number that it equals and how it modifies by, and if there's more, like, talk about that process. That's got to be a very fun but time involving process.
Unity, which the game was developed on, allows you to script little like drop-down menus, which we're using in the game in order to create the different items. So the master database within that we have is the one that's actually in the game's setup on Unity. Now we do have some other spreadsheets and lots of notes and whatnot that help us better organize what the items are and which ones are good and bad, and we're listening to the community's feedback as well. At some point, I feel that we will probably set up, maybe for just some testers, more complicated analytics so that we can really get the breakdown on what percentage of time people choose certain items, so that we can really balance things more granularly than we can now.
What does having a game in early access open up for you as a dev creatively?
Definitely more feedback. As I said, originally this was a game jam game, and we were not I probably would not have worked on it as much as I have if it wasn't for the community's feedback. So I feel that the game is what it is because of the community, and we need new members of the community. We need engagement from the community. And if we stop getting that feedback, or if it stagnates, I feel the game will as well.
Now, when does your game come out, and what platforms are you aiming for at launch? I see here on the Steam page you have August 15th. Is that still a set stone release date for your game?
Yeah, so August 15th will be the early access release. The full release is currently planned for April of next year, so April 2023. At that time, we hope to have the additional characters added into the game, certainly more content, and then that overworld that I was discussing with you earlier. For the early access, we've got 3 characters in the game right now, and then we also have, I think, 5 different levels. There's more than 40 enemies, more than 25 events already, and then there's all the different challenge runs. I can say someone was on our Discord today sharing that they had like over 700 hours in the game. So it definitely seems like some people feel as though there's a lot of content in there already, but there's definitely more that we want to add.
Now, do you have any plans for a console release, Xbox, PlayStation?
Yeah, we will definitely intend to release on the Nintendo Switch. We are already in that process, although things with Nintendo can take some time, so we don't have a firm release date on that yet, but we hope that it would be sometime next year. And then it's possible also that we will do PlayStation and Xbox, although that is more up in the air at the moment.
No, you got the right platform. Switch. These games are great on Switch. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Do you have any plans to take advantage of the touchscreen capabilities on Switch to move your inventory like on your screen?
Yes. So right now the game does use keyboard and mouse support, but we do plan to have the full controller support, and ideally to use the touchscreen for Switch and possibly for mobile if we create a mobile port, which is also not totally confirmed. What's definitely going to be available for the early access is Mac, PC, and Linux. All of them are working for Kickstarter supporters currently.
Now is it because you built this game in Unity? Does that makes it a lot easier to port to like multiple platforms, right? Whether it's Switch, Xbox, or PC, like regardless of the certification process, it just makes that porting process a little bit easier, correct?
Yes, Unity has been very good to us so far. It really helps with porting to different systems. It helped us set up the web-based version of the game, which initially became so popular on itch.io. Yeah, it seems like it's run quite stably on a wide variety of different platforms, but we're still doing a lot of bug fixing. I mean, we're a small team, so we don't have a ton of different hardware. So we're still taking our time to figure out exactly how it works on different systems. Okay.
So the game enters early access August 15th, where people can get their hands on it for the first time. And in the meantime, before then, where can they go to support your game, find out more information, and get updates?
They should definitely go to our Steam page. They can follow and wishlist us there. That's huge. Also, itch.io is a great website where they can leave comments on the game, play a demo version of the game, things like that.